The American College of Medical Informatics presents the 2003 Morris F. Collen Award to William Edward Hammond II. The Morris Collen Award is given each year, when appropriate, to pioneers in the field of medical informatics who best exemplify the teaching and practice of Maury Collen. Throughout his career, this year's recipient, Dr. Ed Hammond, has seen possibilities and then figured out how to do whatever is needed to overcome challenges where others have thought goals were unachievable.
I congratulate Ed Hammond on receiving this award in recognition of his outstanding leadership and his significant technical contributions to medical informatics. I first learned of Ed's unusual technical abilities when he was working with Bill Stead at Duke University. Ed Hammond, an engineer, and Bill Stead, a physician, were an ideal pair for developing medical information systems. As early as 1969, using punch cards for some applications and a mini-computer, they were developing what they called a generalized medical information system for community health. Professor and Dr. William Ed Hammond is truly one of the great pioneers in medical informatics.
Ed Hammond was born in Hendersonville, North Carolina in 1935 to Alfred and Kate Hammond. Ed was the fifth child born to his parents. His father died when Ed was 4, and his mother remarried to Hicks Mabin, a farmer in the Green River Mountains of western North Carolina. His 13 children, her 5, and one they had together made for a large immediate family. The family had no electricity or running water. Ed started work at age 12 in a grocery store, and by his senior year in high school was working a full 8-hour shift at the Balfour Cotton Mill in addition to his coursework. In 1953, Ed won an NROTC scholarship to Duke. He studied electrical engineering, in this the vacuum tube era, spending his summers on Navy cruises. After graduation from Duke in 1957, Ed joined the Navy and went to Pensacola for flight school. That October, he married Kay Stewart Forrester, a native of Durham, North Carolina. Ed's college roommate went to Kay's church, and Ed first saw her there when she sang in the choir. Ed continued active duty in the Navy until 1960, and during that period became the Navy's first air intercept controller. In the fall of 1960, Ed returned to Duke as an instructor in electrical engineering. While on the faculty, he completed a master's. During this time, he and Kay had 2 sons, William Edward Hammond III, born in 1961, and Michael Lane Hammond, born in 1963. Ed joined the first class of the EE PhD program when it was established in 1964. From 1964 through 1967, Ed experienced rapid change in technology, as vacuum tubes were replaced first by transistors and then ultimately large-scale integrated circuits. And he developed his interest in computers language on the IBM 620. After completing his PhD, Ed took a 2-year postdoc with a special program that let him take selected preclinical courses in the School of Medicine. He used a Link 8 computer to develop the first real-time visualization of the cardiac activation sequence mapped on the body surface, a problem that had proven to be insolvable on mainframe computers. He joined the newly formed Department of Community Health Sciences, based 65% in the School of Medicine, while retaining 35% in the School of Engineering.
He rolled up his sleeves and got to work, and he learned how to work with relatively uninitiated patients with the use of computers, and he began to work with opinionated doctors who were sure it wouldn't work anyway, and he made it work, and he developed an entire medical information system which we used for many, many years after that. So he became an essential part of the department.
Ed was always accommodative, and he always wanted to do everything, and so he agreed to do a great many things. In due time, people appreciated the fact that if they got Ed interested, really, and he was easy to get interested, and it could be done in that unit, it would be done.
His interest in electronic health records in 1989. He built a hardware interface between an optical scanner and a PDP-12 and wrote assembly language programs to print an initial medical history captured directly from the patient on MarkSense forms. In the summer of 1970, he assembled a team of 5 medical and undergraduate students. We each built a part of a mini-computer system to take a history directly from a patient. We worked with production code and real patients. We made changes and immediately saw the effect on usability. We were given advice and the freedom to try, to fail, and to try again. By 1972, history and physical exam takers had been combined into a prenatal electronic health record that was operational at Duke until 2002. By 1973, practice management functions such as appointment scheduling and billing permitted an early outpatient clinic system with a computer-based record as its core. The result, TMR, was in use at its peak in over 40 sites in 20 different settings, ranging from a 2-person practice to a 60-bed cancer research hospital. This variety led to Ed's interest in standards. Beginning in 1983, Ed worked with Clem McDonald and others to create messaging standards for exchange of data among systems. The standard for transmission of laboratory data was the first to be adopted by ASTM.
Ed Hammond has been a good friend since I met him in 1973 in his own development shop at Duke. At that time, he was working with Bill Stead, who was a medical student, on the development of electronic medical record systems, and I think had it installed in the community health department at Duke University. Ed's one of the real pioneers in medical informatics and a most knowledgeable developer. He built every important part of an electronic medical record and had it all working well before 1980, and still has things built that are not now running widely in commercial systems.
Ed was a member of the group that formed HL7 in 1987, and he served as chair of that organization in 1990-91 and again in 1996-97. He played a major role in the integration of SGML, XML into HL7, and he was instrumental in the creation of a number of technical committees and special interest groups, including vocabulary, the electronic health record, and most importantly, the patient safety SIG.
Ed believes in people saying what they need. If people will say what they need, what their needs and wants are, then it's possible to find mutual benefit in a relationship and found relationships on a solid foundation that will last. One of the sayings that I picked up from Ed is that you can accomplish a lot if you don't worry about who gets the credit.
With the formation of the ISO Technical Committee TC215 Health Informatics, Ed was elected as the convener of the working group on messaging and communications. This working group created the first standards coming out of the ISO effort.
Standardization in healthcare is not imaginable without the initiatives in the work of Ed Hammond. By his many always excellent, knowledgeable and impressive presentations, he motivated people in the US and in the international arena to join the standardization efforts in healthcare. Without any doubt, he is one of the fathers of the constitution of standardization in healthcare. I think, therefore, that the most important contribution of Ed has been his engagement in the development, propagation and implementation of standards, standard messages, documents, vocabularies. He is a great communicator and coordinator in this field, has convinced people to trust in standards and to implement them. In my opinion, this is the most important contribution of Ed in medical informatics.
Ed has advocated for what we now call the National Health Information Infrastructure since the early 1990s. As chair of the Computer-Based Medical Record Institute, he introduced a proposal for the acceleration of the adoption of the computer-based patient record, identifying barriers and making specific recommendations of how to overcome these barriers. More recently, he was chosen as the chair of the Data Standards Working Group for the Connecting for Health initiative.
His passion and energy and drive for the area of standards and informatics in healthcare is, I think, unparalleled. And we greatly benefited from his leadership and guidance and came to call him our guru in Connecting for Health because he seemed to always be able to figure things out, and that always made us feel a little bit better. Along the way, as I've reflected on Ed, I've come to think of him as the Yogi Berra of healthcare informatics. And I say that because along the way I jotted down a few somewhat funny things that Ed said, and I'll share some of those with you today. One day Ed was fumbling at the podium and trying to read some slides, I guess, in a presentation he was given, and looked up at the audience and said, "That's what I hate about glasses. You can't see under them and you can't see over them." Another time, Ed was in a group, I think strongly disagreeing with someone, but in a very interesting way said, "I agree with you, but I don't agree with what you're saying."
Ed has worked to build each of the medical informatics organizations that has existed during his career. He served 2 years as chair of SIGBio of ACM. He served on the AMC board as well as program chair for 2 of its meetings, and he was part of the forming group of the American Medical Informatics Association and has served on its board continuously as president, treasurer, and chair of the membership committee. Along the way, he served the American College of Medical Informatics in many roles, including its president.
I don't imagine there was a time in the history of medical informatics when Ed Hammond wasn't present and smiling and encouraging the rest of us and important to the field. I don't know when I met him, but I guess at least by 1971 when he was making a TMR, a patient-based record system at Duke using microprocessors. And that system was probably getting more done with microprocessors than most of us were getting with what we then thought of as mainframe computers. But he's stuck with it, and probably the contribution that everyone knows about from Ed is his insistence that we develop standards and that we perfect them, even if that takes decades, and it turns out it has. For that we owe him really a great debt. And I'm happy to see that partly repaid by this well-deserved award today.
Dr. Hammond has received many awards. He is a founding fellow of the American College of Medical Informatics and a founding member of the American Institute for Medicine and Biology and Engineering. HL7's Volunteer of the Year Award is named after Ed. In 2003, he received the Paul Elwood Award for Lifetime Achievement.
Ed is informed, well-published, and highly respected. He is a teacher, an encourager, and a mentor, freely given his time and talents to progress the work of our organization and those who participate in it. His intelligence, humor, and never-ending enthusiasm have inspired others to invest their time and talents in HL7. Years ago, Ed shared with me some invaluable insight. He told me that he believed that HL7's most valuable asset was not the standards that we produce, but instead it is the collection of brilliant and dedicated people that HL7 is able to attract and retain.
Ed has many interests outside of medical informatics. He had an unusually active 33-year career in the U.S. Naval Reserve, retiring in 1989 as a captain. During that period, he served as the commanding officer of several units, including Emergency Response Team 6, which had no active duty equivalent. He created an underwater navigation system for unmanned deep submersibles. This system was used for the recovery of several aircraft that crashed at sea and was used for the mapping of the debris field for the Challenger spacecraft. Ed Hammond is truly a pioneer in the tradition of Maury Collen. He does what others think cannot be done. He works with others and is trusted as a partner. As a result, he is sought out internationally as the expert on what is achievable related to electronic health records and standards.
The American College of Medical Informatics of the American Medical Informatics Association presents the 2001 Morris F. Collen Award to Professors Howard Bleich and Warner Slack. The Morris F. Collen Award is given each year, when appropriate, to pioneers in the field of medical informatics who best exemplify the teachings and practice of Morris Collen. This year's recipients, Howard Bleich and Warner Slack, have been co-presidents of the Center for Clinical Computing at Harvard Medical School and partners for over 30 years. They've pioneered work in medical consultation, patient-computer dialogue, and hospital-wide clinical computing systems. The work of these two has taken place principally at Boston's Beth Israel Hospital. Howard Bleich arrived at Harvard and Beth Israel in 1967. He was joined by Warner Slack in 1970. Since then, the two Harvard professors have created, among other things, an integrated hospital computing system, which is a model for many other institutions. Howard Bleich was born in Atlanta, Georgia in 1934, but grew up in Washington, D.C., where his father worked for the Washington Terminal Company and his mother ran a dry cleaning and laundry business. He was the oldest of three sons, all of whom became doctors. His childhood interests in chemistry included synthesizing organic explosives. He graduated from George Washington University and then went on to get his MD from Emory University. Further up the East Coast, Warner Slack was born in East Orange, New Jersey in 1933. His father was a nuclear physicist who worked on the Manhattan Project. The family moved to Pennsylvania, and Warner graduated from Mount Lebanon High School, where he minored in basketball and football. At Princeton, he played junior varsity football and picked up his degree, and then got his MD from Columbia. Both Howard and Warner served in the Air Force in the 60s. Warner was with a MASH unit at Clark Air Force Base in the Philippines, and Howard served part of his service time in Japan. Following his Air Force service, Warner went to the University of Wisconsin in Madison in the departments of medicine and computer science. It was here that, in conjunction with other members of the Department of Medicine, he developed the first computer-based medical history system in which the computer could engage in an interactive dialogue with a patient. The computer program created so much interest that it was the subject of a documentary on what was then called National Educational Television, a forerunner of PBS. The computer communicated via questions, explanations, requests, and comments. The evaluation of the technique showed that the computer interview elicited more information than traditional questionnaire and interviewing methods.
But the thing that really that occurred to me, the main observation that I had at that time was that this man, for the first time in his experience as a patient, was in control of the process and was really enjoying that. And at the end of the interview, the teletype machine started to click, and he said, "What is that?" And I said, "Well, it's printing out the summary of the things that you told the computer, the way we'd programmed it." And he said, "Well, may I read it?" And I couldn't think of any reason why he shouldn't. And I think that was the first time at the University of Wisconsin hospitals that a patient was granted the opportunity to read his own medical record.
And at the same time, at Harvard and Beth Israel, Howard Bleich was also developing a computer program. His first study, Computer Evaluation of Acid-Base Disorders, is now widely recognized as a pioneering work in the field of expert systems in medicine. Although this program wasn't called artificial intelligence, the term wasn't in common use then. Many of the characteristics of artificial intelligence programs were present in this early work. The 3,500 medical rules in this expert system are comparable to those in artificial intelligence programs in medicine being studied today. In 1970, Warner was lured away from the University of Wisconsin to come to Harvard and Beth Israel to work with Howard. It's a partnership that has lasted.
The combination or the combo of these two is really quite remarkable, maybe unique in all of academic history. Howard invited, as I understand it, invited Warner to join him at Harvard and made him an exact equal, and they worked as exact equals. They had different strengths and they specialized sort of independently. They each had some work they only did alone, but it was really quite remarkable. They sitting together talking, they were comfortable, they were collaborative, they were supportive, they were stronger together because of their both working together. There aren't many pairs that I know of who could pull that off, or who have ever pulled that off.
The two of them set up a laboratory at that time which was called the Laboratory for Computer Medicine, and they started independently working on their own projects. Warner on what he called patient-computer dialogue, and Howard on expert systems and consultation with the computer systems. Howard Bleich and Warner Slack, when they joined forces at the Beth Israel, had about 10,000 articles that they had ripped from various medical journals. At that time, they started putting these articles into a database which they subsequently called Paperchase. This allowed them to search for articles for teaching rounds and for reasons of their own personal research.
They used to read current contents every week and send postcards to collect the reprints. And after I had about 4,000 or 5,000 reprints, I couldn't find them. And I filed them as best I could. And then we had a computer laboratory. So one day I asked one of the programmers if he could write us a computer program to help me start the reprint, find the reprints. And that's how it got started. We put a terminal in my office, and at night the house staff started coming there and searching the literature, taking my reprints, not always returning them. And then one day one of the residents said we should move the terminal to the hospital library. And we then got a grant from the National Library of Medicine to expand the file, not only to my reprints, but to the library collection. We put a terminal in the library, and to our surprise, within a year, our hospital became the largest searcher of the Medline database in the world.
Paperchase is available now in 60 countries. It's actively promoted in the United States and Canada, and it's available over CompuServe and TimeNet, SprintNet in the United States, DataPack in Canada, OSPAC in Australia, throughout the world over Internet. It's available on about 40 different gateways.
The Center for Clinical Computing, set up by Howard and Warner starting way back when, has now computerized every department of the Beth Israel and Brigham and Women's hospitals. The system serves the needs of physicians, nurses, house staff, and other hospital personnel, as well as patients themselves.
At Beth Israel, these two crafted one of the world-class, best clinical computing systems of all time. This system was the most reliable, the most loved, the most comprehensive of any system of its time. It was really the Toyota of clinical systems. Howard invented, at least to my understanding, some major technology to make this work. It was a clustered system, and I believe it was also a memory sharing system long before this kind of technology was commercially available.
The availability of this kind of information and its automatic entry into the transaction between patient and doctor really are a very legitimate part of medical inquiry. And I am constantly just overwhelmed at the ease with which information is made available to people who are taking care of patients.
The computer programs reach outside the hospital too. One is a dietary counseling program.
Carmen Alicia has been using one of Dr. Slack's programs to help her lose weight.
It's like a computer's talking to you. This is the way it was set up. And it will just take you step by step.
Carmen uses this program 2 to 3 times a week. She's lost 40 pounds in a year and has gone from a size 14 to a size 6, all without visiting a doctor or support group.
How is this more helpful than, say, going to just a class on nutrition.
I can see what I'm doing wrong here on paper.
Carmen has gotten so comfortable with the program, she often calls it a he, without ever having met the program designers.
It had some really cute jokes, too. It's like telling you that not to feel guilty because if you ate a candy bar or you know, something like you felt like you went off the wall. It's like, okay.
If the writing is done wisely and well, patients enjoy this.
I consider myself lucky. I've had the privilege of working with Howard and Bleich and Warner Slack for over 2 decades. They're really both unique individuals, but operate in a very interesting way as a team. In some ways, they seem like an odd couple. On the surface, they couldn't be more different. Howard is quite meticulous. He has a very ordered desk. He has computer files for everything, including jokes that he uses in speeches. Warner, on the other hand, doesn't wear a watch. We all know in the laboratory that not to give Warner the only copy of anything that's important because it will get lost on his desk.
I first met Warner Slack in the early 70s when I was a medical student at Duke. I was developing a questionnaire for patients who had headache, and Warner had developed similar kind of questionnaires, and he was willing to share them, give us actually the source code so that we could see how he had made this work. In the early 70s, when I was trying to build a model of a consulting program, Howard was willing to give Ed Hammond and me the complete source code of his acid-base system so that we could reprogram it in a different language. And he gave us 50 test cases so that it made sure that it worked the way it was supposed to. So this total openness and collaboration, I think, has marked their style.
This is a very generous thing in today's climate. It would be unheard of for a researcher to give their computer code away now that we're all so concerned about intellectual property and the like. Well, that was never the way that Howard and Warner operated. They were really generous and they were deeply concerned about every person that worked with them. And this is reflected in the kinds of computer programs that they were able to develop, that human quality comes through in the way that they taught us to design computer programs and interact with other humans.
Well, it's fun to have a chance to congratulate Howard Bleich and Warner Slack on receiving the Collen Medal. Certainly they're well-deserved and a happy occasion. Warner and I, of course, were together at the College of Physicians and Surgeons. Our wives were friends, and so we've had a lot of the same background, and I think a lot of mutual appreciation. It's been fun for me to see his meteoric career, and this may be, if not the apex, well, we hope at least a highlight. In the case of Howard, I really first met him actually through NLM. I was on the study section many years ago, and I was the primary reviewer of Howard's proposal to make what ended up being called paper chase. And I don't remember who were the other reviewers, but I do remember that I was able to defend it before the study section on the grounds that certainly this was going to be an honest piece of work. If it worked, it would be well reported. If it didn't work, it would be honestly reported. And that it was a good thing for NLM to have an alternative plan B, for users to have another way to get at Medline. And of course, he's made a grand success of the work.
I think summing up their contributions are this real focus on how to use a computer to do things that help real people, be they patients or be they physicians.
Warner Slack has a saying about people. He describes them as being someone who he would like to have in a foxhole next to him during a time of stress or battle. I can think of no two people other than Howard Bleich and Warner Slack, who I'd rather have in a foxhole next to me at a time of stress. They're generous, warm human beings. They're great men. I can think of no two people more deserving to be this year's co-recipients of the Morris Collen Award.